Welcome back, guys. Look, I know it's been a long week. You guys are not going to be disappointed. Thank y'all for coming back, tuning in to Mr. Ken and Miss Candy Wells. This is an exciting conclusion, so sit down, buckle up, get you some popcorn. Here's part 2. So they take you to this place, and when you get there, what's day one?
Well, day one, I was put in a cell, maybe 12, 13-foot square room. And there was a table in there and one chair. Of course, I wasn't allowed to sit at the chair or do anything with the table. That was for interrogation purposes. Well, when I was captured, they stripped me down to my underwear. We had walked through the jungle a couple hours and came to a little fire camp. And that's where I really counted the first military guy, I guess. The others were militia. He gave me a flight suit. Well, I had the major's rank on it, so I knew it was Lee's flight suit. So they let me put a flight suit back on it. And remember, it's in December, so it's kind of cool out. Allowed me to put they had given me my boots back. Wouldn't let me put socks on, wouldn't let me lace them up. So I'd been better off to go barefoot through the jungle than wear those, because I hadn't got a big blister that got infected and ended up blood poisoning in my leg a few days later. But anyway, so get on the helicopter, and I've got a flight suit on. And it happens to be Lee's. Lee's still in his shorts, freezing to death.
Dang.
But I've got his flight suit on. So we get to the camp, and everything's taken away, including my underwear. So I was just naked in there for probably a few hours. And then they brought me some prison clothes, just like, boxer shorts and T-shirt.
And that's all the cover you had, and it was cold out.
Yeah. And then eventually our wardrobe for pretty much the entirety of the war was, we had 2 sets of T-shirts, 2 sets of boxer shorts, and then a pair of long sleeve, shirt with long sleeves, and then a pair of long pants too. So that's pretty much what we had during that time. So
what was the food situation, the drink situation?
Well, we had pumpkin soup twice a day, every day for 6 months, and then cabbage soup twice a day, every day for 6 months, and then the cycle would repeat itself. That was kind of the basic. We might get a second plate of something, maybe some soybean curd. It's kind of like eating large curd cottage cheese as far as the texture of it, but it's made out of soybeans, so there was some protein value to that, or might get a little bit of rice. We occasionally got some bread, would be like half of a submarine sandwich size French bread. That was like eating cracked wheat bread, with all the little crunchy things in there, but the little crunchy things would be hundreds of bugs that were cooked into the bread. And my philosophy was, protein is protein.
It's more protein, yeah.
So down the hatch. But I also got the nickname of garbage gut later in the war, as I would eat pretty much anything.
So did they keep you by yourself? Were you in solitary?
Solitary confinement for 9 days. And then I was taken out and put into a cell with the backseater of that other 4 that had gone down that we were providing search and rescue coverage for. Dick Bond is his name. I've got his bracelet as well as Lee's on. And then after I was put in there with Dick, a few minutes later, then Lee was brought in with us. So the 3 of us were put together after 9 days. And we were there and still at the Hanoi Hilton then for about 3 more days. And then they moved us to another camp that we had nicknamed the Zoo. I don't know what the official name of it was, but the old prisoners had nicknamed it the Zoo. And the 3 of us were together pretty much the rest of the time. Occasionally, one of us would get moved to a different cell, but so we got to be good friends. And it was over at the zoo that I think the maybe reality was going to set in. We were there for about 2 weeks, and the guard came and took us out of our cell for a couple hours. And when we were brought back, we could tell someone had been working in the courtyard just outside of our cell, and that's why we had been pulled out. He locks us up, leaves, and Dick finds a piece of candy on the floor with a paper wrapped around it. It was a note. Opened it up, and it said, "Welcome to the zoo. There are 79 prisoners in this camp other than yourselves. You three are the only three that have been in this camp less than 5 years." The way it was worded was less than 5, repeat 5 years. So that kind of brought reality to our situation.
It gave you the idea that this may not be a short visit.
And it turns out that the longest held POW, Everett Alvarez from the Navy, he was captured August 5 of 64. This is now January of 72.
Wow.
So he's been there 7.5 years when we show up.
Yeah. Up to that point, had you thought maybe this won't be a long, imprisonment? Maybe you would be out soon initially.
Yeah. Well,
you just didn't know what to
really
expect.
what I was expecting, but I had a lot of confidence in President Nixon to bring the war to an end eventually. Well, through that note, we established a way to communicate with these 79 other guys. There were 3 cells of 26, 26, and 27 individuals in those large cells. The 3 of us were kept in about a 15 by 15 foot cell, separated from them. And our communication was very important to us. And we started out, there was an 8-foot high brick wall that separated our courtyard from the next building of POWs. We used the junction of that brick wall and the wall of the building as a mailbox. So we passed notes back and forth. The problem was we always had a guard with us.
So it's pretty tough to be able to do that and not be noticed.
The hard part was getting over there. Well, there was an anthill at the base of the brick wall. I've made friends with the ants. I take them breadcrumbs and stuff. And the guard eventually just, he's nuts.
Yeah.
So, but I always had a note rolled up in my sleeve. And Dick was a smoker. He got a ration of 6 cigarettes a day. So between Dick and Lee, they would distract the guard for 6 or 7 seconds, long enough to light a cigarette. Gave me time to get up, drop the note, or to pick up one back. So we'd pass one day their direction, and they would pass back the next day. They asked us, these guys were starved for information. And they said, just give us all the information you can give us about the outside world in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I imagine a lot had changed.
And they gave us about 40 questions to try to answer. Lee was a 13-year major at that point. Very smart individual. I called him a walking encyclopedia. He could remember names, dates, numbers that he'd read in a magazine 2 years ago. And he was the senior ranking guy of our 3, so he would dictate what went out. I was the scribe, and then also the courier. And then Dick was usually clearing for guards to keep us from getting caught. If you ever got caught, they told us, the old guys, if you ever get caught communicating, you'll be tortured for it, so be very careful. So, Dick had stolen a piece of pencil lead from a mechanical pencil during an interrogation session. He got the pencil below the table, pulled out the lead, broke off the blunt end, and then stuck it back in. And so we had pencil to write with. A lot of the guards would throw their cigarette wrappers just in our courtyard. So we'd scrounge those up when the guard wasn't looking, bring them in, and if you unfold the wrapper, you'd have a rectangular piece of paper to write on. And so we had everything we needed. And then it's just a matter of getting over there and making that drop. Just one of the questions they asked us was, when do you think we're going to get out of here? Mm-hmm. And how do you answer that when you're a new guy?
And you don't have a clue.
Don't have a clue.
Yeah.
And I just, within our own cell, we just kind of had a little bet going, let's see if we can pick what day we get to go home. And so I said, well, I think President Nixon's going to get reelected in November of 72. This is now January 72 that we're talking. Mm-hmm. He'll get reelected. Give him a couple months to bring the war to an end, a couple months to get us home. That puts us in March of 73. March is the month of Candy's birthday, so I said March 29.
So it was going to be a birthday present.
Yeah.
Hey, look, you got to have those moments of hope.
And then eventually I got released on the 28th of March, got to the Philippines, and when I called her the first time, it was 4 a.m. in the States on March 29, her birthday.
So almost to the point of what you actually had predicted.
Yeah.
Now, there's obviously a lot of questions I have here, but getting you through the camp, you were there, as you mentioned, 466 days. That is over a year. That is almost 14 months. Don't get my math on this one.
Yeah, 15 and a half
15 months. And a half months. So I was doing fast math on that one, so forgive me. 15 and a half months. You get there on day one, and you go into solitary confinement for 9 days. They move you to the zoo. You go into the zoo, at least you have two partners with you. You find out that you're one of nearly 80 other guys, and some of those guys have been there for 7 years or more. Yeah. And here you are now, completely isolated from the real world. At what point or how long was it that you were ever able to communicate anything back home to Miss Candy, your family, anybody?
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to talk a little bit about some more communication in the camp, and then
I would love to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Through that note drop, we established another way to communicate, and they said, we have drilled a hole about the size of a nickel through 15 inches of brick and mortar.
How do you do that?
Through the end of, with a wire, through the end of the closest building to us. That hole was aimed right at our door. There's a peephole on our door with a flap on the outside where the guards would push it to one side, check on us from time to time. I could move that flap to one side from the inside of the cell. I could see the hole in the end of the building, and they had to drill it up high enough so the guards wouldn't find it, so high that one man had to stand on the shoulders of another man just to get up to the hole. And they would and then about noon every day, there was a gong that would go off in the camp, and I think it signaled like a siesta time for the guards. And so there'd be about an hour's time where we might not see a guard at all. That's when we did our communicating. So the gong would go off. The whole camp is communicating from one cell to another. So a man stood on the shoulders of another man, stuck the wire through it, and I could see it from the inside of my cell, the wire. And he'd flick it up and down, once for a dot, twice for a dash, and use the Morse code to transmit to me. He could see my entire hand through the hole. I'd stick it out through the hole. I could use a visual alphabet similar to American Sign Language and transmit back to him. So we did that about an hour every day. we also used the notes for overt communication. If they found a note, it's not like, we're giving up sensitive information, but the visual stuff was for covert, anything covert, what's going on in the camp, who's being interrogated for what, and so on. But this communication, that was the bond that tied us together and made us stronger as a group. They were telling us, their 7 years worth of experience, how to fight these guys, and resist them. And then we were able to answer these 40-some questions. They want to know, how's the stock market doing? Did we really land on the moon?
I get it.
Think
though.
about that. January 72, we landed on the moon in July of 69.
Yeah.
And they didn't know. Someone had received a letter from home with a postage stamp on it, showed Neil Armstrong standing on the moon. Was this for real?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and another question was, have they developed a birth control pill for males yet?
But you know what? I get it.
A little bit of humor.
The world's changing so quick, and you're like, I don't know what I'm missing.
So when we started into that went from January to April. And I think that was like our purpose in being there, to me, is why Lee, Dick, and I happened to be placed there at that time. That's where God needed us to be to help these guys.
Yeah.
And probably 2 days after we finished answering their last of the 40 questions, they moved us back to the Hanoi Hilton, the three of us. It's like, okay, that was our purpose.
Yeah.
In being there. And when we go to some of our reunions, I hear some stories about, I sent them a 3-page, almost newspaper article of the space program. I had put together a model of the Saturn V rocket and this, the space capsule, the lunar module and everything, command module. So I drew all that out. My degree was in aerospace and in astronautical engineering as well. So I had some knowledge about that, drew pictures. And at our last reunion last year, somebody was talking about that, getting that. So we realized later just how important it was for us to be doing what we were doing. And
absolutely. I mean, at that point in time, some of those guys, as you had said, had been there over 5 years.
Yeah.
You were fresh, and so you had all that to be able to share with them. So I do believe you were sent there.
Like
for
I say, Lee was just such a wealth of information, and he passed away about 10 years ago from progressive aphasia, which is a brain disease. But and then my other guy, Dick, just passed away last August, so not quite a year ago.
So with the communication, when was the first time you were able to send something home?
Moved us back from the zoo to the Hanoi Hilton in about probably the end of April of 72. From there, they put us in an area called Heartbreak Hotel. There were 8 cells. Each cell was about 6.5 by 6.5 foot square, and there were 4 on each side of a little aisleway. So they put 2 of us, Dick and I, in one cell together, and in there for about 2 weeks, and then eventually put us into a larger cell. And then as new prisoners were being captured, they were put in with us. So we were the old guys
you were
of
the
the
seniors
new
at
guy
that
group.
point. Yeah.
We had been there the longest. And the 4 of us captured in December of 71, we were the first ones captured in over 3 years because of the bombing halt. So it went from October of 68, the bombing halt, until December of 71 when we were captured. So no prisoners captured between there. So there's quite a gap between these 5-year guys when we show up and then us. So we get into Heartbreak Hotel a couple weeks in May, and then into a larger cell. It was in June of 72 that I was pulled out for an interrogation session. Like I said, it was going to be an interrogation session. Just took me to a small interrogation room, sat down, and the guard handed me a letter from Candy that she had written in April of 72. And so it was probably her fourth or fifth one that she had written, but the first one that I had gotten.
So did your friends have the same opportunity?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
and this letter, it started out, Kevin and I are fine. So that's 6 months after she gave birth to Kevin, before I knew that we actually had a boy.
So you didn't even know?
I didn't know at that point. There's a little funny story back at the zoo. A friend of mine was captured, put in the cell, a couple cells down. We're talking out the back windows one night. And I said, you hear anything about Candy? He said, well, I read in Stars and Stripes that Candy had a boy and they're both doing fine. So this is February, a couple months after he was born. All right. Well, a few days later, someone else was captured and put in the cell between us. And I asked, we're talking to him, said, I read in Stars and Stripes, Candy had a girl, and they're both doing fine. So there was about a 4-month period where I didn't know what we had, or if we had twins, or maybe we had twins, or whatever. So finally, when I got the letter, then and 4 months later.
So let me ask you, Miss Candy, when was the first time you knew he had been captured?
Okay, on December 18th of 1971, I was sitting in my parents' living room, visiting with friends of theirs that had stopped by, and my younger brother, Greg, spotted a car, an Army car, pulling onto our street. Nobody considered that unusual because my brother Rod had served in the Army, and they just thought the Army was bringing more paperwork regarding Rod. But the car got closer, and then Greg said, no, it's an Air Force car. Well, my mother became hysterical, and I just patted her leg, naive as I was, saying, oh, Mom, they're probably just bringing me papers to sign. Well, the two officers came to the door and asked for Mrs. Kenneth Wells, and my dad answered it. And he spoke in a real deep voice. I think he was hoping to protect me from the hurt. And since I was 9 months pregnant, I wasn't real quick in getting up. So I'm pushing myself off the sofa and going to the door. And the officers came in the house and read the telegram to me. We regret to inform you that your husband, First Lieutenant Kenneth R. Wells, is missing in action. So I asked them lots of questions, but they didn't have any answers.
Yeah.
And then on the 21st, I found out, I got a phone call from the Defense Department that he was a confirmed prisoner of war. Plus, I got to see him on TV.
Oh, wow.
And if you're my age,
yeah,
you would have been able to see him too, because all the major news channels were covering it because it was such a great story to share about these American
So at least you
men.
knew he was alive.
I got to see him walk behind. He came from behind a black curtain, and he had his prison pajamas on. And just seeing him walk was a blessing, because I knew from being a pilot's wife, I knew about the ejection seat, about the...
Could cut your legs off.
Yes, how important it was to be in the right position and everything. So I knew about that. So seeing him walk and that he had his arms and legs, I was just pleased. And but everybody was so happy except me. His parents were happy. My parents were happy. But I was depressed because I really thought he would be, that he would be
Rescued.
rescued.
Mhm.
And so I was kind of depressed. Then 2 days later, I had our son on the 23rd. And that was I was almost in solitary confinement also because it was the Christmas holiday. And after I had the baby, nobody was around.
Yeah.
They're home celebrating. Even my mom and dad went to visit my grandma and grandpa. So I'm in a hospital room, all by myself, 23 years old. So it was really depressing. And then in January of 72, I went to my first Washington State POW MIA meeting for family members of loved ones. And one of the older ladies, she was the president, she took me there. And so we walk as it's at one of the big hotels, and we're going into one of these rooms, and there's about 50 people in there, and she leans over and she whispers and she said, "Candy, there's only 2 or 3 of you that know that your loved ones are alive."
That's a reality check.
That was a reality. I said, "Okay, sister, get off the pity party.
Yeah.
Quit feeling sorry for yourself. Be thankful that you know about your husband." And that really made me aware. It brought me to being more aware of the politics involved. It made me aware of all the lies being told by the media about about the war in Vietnam, about my husband. I'm reading a newspaper article that they can't get his age right. They don't get the base right. I mean, there was just so many things that were frustrating. And as a wife, we went to sell these bracelets to different community events that had the man who was a POW or missing. And we would go to sell it. And during that time, because Vietnam was such a conflict, people wanted to argue more about the war than to be interested in the bracelets, But thankful for those people who did. But that's, and before, I guess, about the same time, I was, got a call that the Defense Department would be sending 2 men to my house. And so they came, and I made sure I asked for their credentials and made sure who they were and let them in the house. And anyhow, they then told me that Ken had been trained in a covert communication, and they were asking me, "Will you cooperate with us?" And of course I said I would. So then they gave me the information. They said, "When you write a letter to him, we want you to send it to DC. We'll make some minor changes and send it back to you, and then you'll rewrite it exactly, whether it's a misspelled word, punctuation, everything. You rewrite it exactly the way it's written and send it to Ken. It'll mean something to him." I said, "Okay." And if you get a letter from him, put it in. They had page protectors to put his letter in. Now, these letters are not what we would consider normal. They were about 4 inches, 5 lines That's all. They were provided by the North Vietnamese. So you couldn't get a whole lot, especially me, because I wrote kind of big. Ken could get a lot in. But he would, he had good printing and that. But anyhow, I would write my letter and send it to DC for the changes and then rewrite it. And if I got a letter from him, put it in a page protector, send it to DC. Then I would get a Xerox copy, followed by the original about 2 to 3 months later.
So all of that training was coming together for you at that point. Let me ask you this real quick. So I wanted to go back to it real fast. So in 1971, what was the month that you found out your brother had died?
He was listed. He died in. He was listed as missing in March and killed in action in May.
So his official kill
Official
date is 4 March of 71.
Got you. But you find out that they have declared him dead, missing in action to dead in action.
And it was classified for 40 years.
And so you go from that to shortly thereafter, your husband.
Yeah, same year.
In the same year is a POW.
It's the same door they knocked on.
So the moment that you're about to tell everybody you're pregnant is the moment that you're being told the worst news you could be told about your brother.
Yes.
2 days before you give birth, is that right? 2 days? Or you're 9 months pregnant, your plane goes down.
Yeah, 5 days before Kevin was born, 18 December.
Okay, so it's 5
plane
days
went down.
before.
I was captured the 19th. The 21st, she found out I was alive. And the 23rd, Kevin was born.
So the important part about this that I wanted to bring together, and I know you guys you had to fill in some gaps there, right? So you had to tell the story of how it all flowed and went through. But here's the thing that's so amazing to me, because thinking about this from being in the military myself, but then knowing people that are in the military currently and some of the things they deal with, I think that there's always the, I say now there is, not back then, but there is the approach of honoring our veterans, loving our veterans, understanding what their sacrifice is. But so often we step past what the family's dealing with. And the idea that here you are, brand new to being introduced to, hey, you're about to be a mom now, to, oh, now you're a mom. And in a very short stint, all of a sudden, now your husband's gone. You don't know if you're going to get him back. Over a year goes by. You come home. So as you mentioned, you make this prediction that you're going to be home on the 29th. You come back on the 28th of March. You come back home. Tell my viewers real quick, because this is important. When you get home, what's that first moment? Because most people cannot relate to the idea of the first time you're seeing your child. They're over a year old. What is that moment when you get off that plane?
Maybe.
Why don't you take this to begin with?
Well, on that, he called me at 4 a.m. on the 29th, my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And then also later on, I got a second phone call. And on that phone call, then he told me, of course, I was excited and proud. I'm a new mom, sort of, and so I want to show him our son. And he's so cute and such a good boy. And he says, I don't want you to bring him to the airport. And I'm like, oh.
That first time, yeah. So.
And I said, oh, okay. And I thought, just go with the flow. There's a reason for everything. And I'm glad I just let him, proceeded with what he wanted to do, what would be best for him. And certainly then I thought of all the nervousness of meeting your son in front of thousands of people at the airport, at Travis. And so it made a lot of sense. It was best. But I want to go back just a little bit, if I could. You have said, oh, you're a strong woman, all this. I want you to know I was not a strong woman before the capture. When I was married, I was very dependent upon Ken for all my decisions. How shall I wear my hair? What dress should I wear?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it goes on. I did not make decisions for myself. And so then then my mom and dad decided to move to a town an hour away that I didn't know a soul in. And I thought, I'm not, and my dad was pushing it. And I said, Mom, I'm not moving there. I'm going to stay here where Grandma and Grandpa and my aunt live. And I have my church home family there. And I'm going to stay there. And I found a townhouse for Kevin and I to live in. We had agreed that I could live on since I was living with Mom and Dad,
Mm-hmm.
I needed only half his salary. So I had $500 a month. It paid the rent, utilities, a car payment, bought living room furniture, a washer, a dryer, and we had the best dressed kid in town and whatever. And I still have money left over. That's living on $500. The other $500 of his salary went to an automatic savings program, which it built up over the years, and which we were able to use that money towards our very first home in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when he returned. So I just wanted to give you that little background.
Sure. Well, you know what? I think, though, that the strength was there. You just needed the moment to unlock it. I think so often that's the story to people's lives, is that there is this inner ability that we don't give ourselves credit for. But sometimes when we push ourselves out of our comfort zone and we find that we're in a place that we have no choice but to fight or fall, when we fight, we unlock things about ourselves that we would have never known otherwise. So that fight was always there. You just never had the opportunity to show it. And whenever Mr. Ken went down like he did, you had no choice. It was fight or fall. And you had Kevin, and you couldn't fall.
And she was
That's right.
23 years old at the time.
23 years old. And, it's time you had to put your big girl pants on, as they say, right? So, all right. So we're a little long. We're going to finish up here. But you went from 69 to 78 serving. So you make it back home. Clearly, you stayed in the Air Force for a little while longer.
Yeah, five more years.
5 more years. And here's the message that I want people to hear. Sacrifice and service is something that not everybody will always have to experience. Some folks will go through their life. They never had to sacrifice much. But what they need to understand, what people should understand, is that our nation is who we are today. The things that we get to do today and the freedoms that we get to enjoy are because of people like yourself that went out there, fought in wars that you had nothing to do with, but you were serving your country. That hasn't changed to this day. Our military members are out there serving this country because it's something they believe in, that they love, and they want to protect the future for all Americans, not any certain demographic of an American, but all Americans. So, sir, it's we're at that point where we got to wrap up, but here's what I want to ask you. What would you tell folks, young people today? What would be the message to them about embracing the patriotism of America? Here we are in Veterans Month. The service meant a lot to you. It meant a lot to your fellow airmen. You wear the bracelets. Your two buddies that you were in prison with, they just passed recently. And here's the thing: you live on in their honor. What message would you give the young people today?
How much time can I have?
As much as you need, sir.
Well, first of all, freedom is very important to me because of this experience. And there are only two definitions of the noun freedom. One is it's a state or quality of being free. There are dozens of definitions of the word free. Plug in whatever you like. Second definition of freedom is that it's a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
I think I view all of my life now in light of and through the prism of freedom. So when I see all this stuff going on in politics, I look at that through the prism of freedom. How free are we going to be as people, as a nation, because of what you're trying to do to this country or for this country? So freedom is very important to me. In fact, my call sign when I came back from there was Freedom 33. I happen to be the 33rd individual going through this training program to get us recurrent again to get back into flying. So that's my call sign. That's what I am. It took me a long time to actually get used to what freedom was. I'd go out for a run and think, man, this is pretty cool. I can go anywhere I want to. I had recurring dreams at night that I was home on the farm I grew up on. And Candy and Kevin were there in my dream. I was on a 2-week leave of absence from prison. Had been home 1 week and had 1 week to go. So I was just trying to enjoy my freedom, but I knew I had to go back to prison. I found out years later through an Air Force doctor that about 95% of us POWs had similar dreams, that freedom really wasn't real to us for a long time. How special it is. The message I try to give people, especially young people, when I'm speaking to them, I have 5 points. I just call it advice from an old veteran. And the first one is, don't worry about your life, what you'll eat or drink, or your body, what you'll wear. God's going to take care of you. Second is to be content. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Philippian church from prison. And he said, I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances, whether hungry or well-fed. Third is to appreciate your family, because you never know, someday you might be separated from them and you won't be able to have contact with them. So appreciate them, even if they get on your nerves sometimes. Fourth is to cherish freedom. We're not guaranteed by God. I believe God gave America its freedoms, but it's up to us to hold on to them and protect them, not take them for granted. And then finally, just be thankful for everything that God has done for us and for our country.
Perspective, sir. And all of those points are extremely valid. Well, Miss Candy, I hope that you have had a good time here. Mr. Ken, I really appreciate y'all's time coming into the studio and talking to me about your past, your story. Now, obviously, you guys get to share this with your grandkids and your great-grandkids and your great-great-grandkids, because once you put it on a podcast, it's out there forever, as they say. So thank you so much for coming into the studio. I really do appreciate your time, your service to this country. It means so much to me, honestly speaking. I hope that this inspires someone out there that watches this and says, hey, you know what? I want to step up. I want to serve my country. I'm going to go out there and do that now. And Officer Wells, you're the one that caused that.
Wow.
You gave them that strength and encouragement. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I want to say to my listeners and my viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. Each and every week you guys come in here, you give me great advice, you give me great comments, you follow my guest, and that means everything in the world to me. So I'm going to ask you at this time, please go to my website, motivatewithcoachcamp.com, go to my YouTube, subscribe, and until next time, Coach Camp out.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up, it's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time to break up so I can make a better me. Better believe in your mind, cause it's everything. You can mold, shape, find almost anything. All it takes is some time and some clarity to find your identity. It's mind over